Thank you.
Well, last but not least, Mr. ניקלס אקסלסון, מומחה בנושא מעצר, אני עוברת לעברית, אוזניות למי שצריך, מומחה בנושא מעצר בוועד המנהל השוודי להגירה. מר אקסלסון הוא בעל תואר למשפטים ועובד בתחום ההגירה בעשור האחרון. ב5 השנים האחרונות הוא משמש כמומחה בנושא מעצר, כולל חלופות למעצר, בוועד המנהל השוודי להגירה. מיסטר אקסלסון גם הספיק לבקר בסהרונים וחולות ביום הראשון להגעתו לארץ, והתרשם גם מהמערכת הישראלית, והוא יהיה הדובר האחרון שלנו. אחרי ההרצאה הזו אנחנו נפתח את הבמה לשאלות ותשובות של כל הדוברים. תודה.
Thank you for those, I hope, kind words. I didn't understand it that much, but and also perfect. Thank you to the UNHCR, obviously, for having me here. I really appreciate it. So I will try to give you an image of the Swedish Migration Board, what we do, and also of the asylum process and reception process in Sweden. And I will also tell you a bit about our work with detention. And since I'm a specialist in detention issues, that's my home turf, more or less. Since my Hebrew is non-existing, I have to speak English, which is perhaps not impeccable, so feel free to use those translating things that you have on the board. Okay? So, the Migration Board is a governmental agency, and we answer to the Justice of Ministry, but we are more or less sovereign in our relation to the Ministry. So the Ministry controls our work more or less via the budget bill and ordinances. So the thing that we do at the Migration Board mainly is that we process applications for those who want to move to Sweden, to come here and live with their families. If you just want to visit Sweden, you need a visa. If you want to work or study in Sweden, if you want to become a Swedish citizen, or if you want to apply for asylum. And we are also responsible for all the reception for asylum seekers. And besides this, we also register EU and EES citizens who wish to live in Sweden. I will give you a bit about the statistics so that you realize our situation. This is some figures from last year. In total, we granted residence permits to a bit more than 115,000 persons. And as you can see here, most of them are family reunification cases. So that's the most common thing when it comes to why people have the permission to stay in Sweden. And on the second place, we have refugee and grounds, other grounds of protection. And I will look closer into the asylum part of this. So the way for us to get in contact with asylum seekers and refugees is by accepting and helping quota refugees to come to Sweden. And I think on a yearly basis we're speaking about approximately 1,700 to 1,900 individuals. We process asylum applications for those who want to apply for asylum. We provide accommodation for those who can't find accommodation on their own. And we operate the detention centers. And also we assist when it comes to returns to the country of origin. And here I would like to say that the Migration Board's role when it comes to return is restricted to voluntary return. If there is a need of forced return, the case will be handed over to the police authority instead. Okay? Yeah, the asylum process then. The most common thing for someone who wants to apply for asylum to get in contact with the Swedish Migration Board is that they enter Sweden and then they go to one of our migration offices. And we have migration offices pretty much all over Sweden. So there are plenty of spots for the people that come to Sweden to go to. But the most common is that you enter via Stockholm, which is the capital of Sweden, or via the more southern parts of Sweden, Malmö and Gothenburg. Another way also to get in contact with the Migration Board, if you are staying illegally in Sweden, you have no permission, and in some stage of your staying in Sweden you will be apprehended by the police, for instance in a traffic control or something like that. And if you then say that you want to apply for asylum, the police will direct you to the Swedish Migration Board and the nearest Migration Board office. So in this process there are some stakeholders involved. Obviously we have the Migration Board officer who is dealing with the interview of the person who is applying for asylum. We have an interpreter who interprets the interview to the chosen language. And we also have the public counsel who is the legal assistant to the person who applies for asylum. And I would like here to say that to us it's very important to have a process that's transparent, and we really work with having the applicant to understand the process, and so that he or she understands the grounds for asylum and what will be the steps of the process. Okay? So I wish I could tell you the time, but at the moment we have quite a high influx in Sweden. The expected influx will be 80,000 asylum applicants this year. So we have moved from a process that should take not more than say 4, 5, 6 weeks into a situation where the migration offices are fully booked until I think next summer actually. So right now it's quite hard to give you the time frames of the process. But anyway, you apply for asylum, you are interviewed by the migration officer, you have your legal counsel to assist you, and then the Migration Board reaches the decision. So at this point of stage, the decision will be you will either stay or you will have to go home. So if you will stay, then you will have a permanent residence permit, and if not, you will have to return back home. You also have the possibility here to launch an appeal against the decision, and that you must do within 3 weeks, and then it will be the migration court who will look into your case, and they will look into the case from every aspect more or less. I mean, they are looking into the situation in the country of origin, the reasons for why you apply for asylum, and they will do a holistic approach on the case. And if they say that the Migration Board's decision is wrong, you will stay, then you can, you will also have the residence permit. Or they will say that the Migration Board's decision is correct, you will have to leave Sweden. But then you will have another opportunity to appeal to the Migration Court of Appeal, and also here within 3 weeks. And when they reach their decision, the decision also will be in force of law. So if the answer then is no, then you will have to leave Sweden as well. So then the return process will take place. I'll just give you some more statistics that's related to the asylum process. We're just trying to give you an image on what it looks like when it comes to the biggest groups. Last year was people coming from Syria applying for asylum, and then we have stateless people, Eritrean people, and people from Somalia, Afghanistan and Serbia. So in total 54,000 people approximately. This year, so far, we had almost 70,000 people applying for asylum. Syria is still on top, but Eritrea has moved up with a bit more than 10,000 applicants. And then we have stateless people, Somalia, Afghanistan and Iraq. At this moment, and regarding the situation here in Israel, I think it's important to mention this, that the people from Eritrea who applies for asylum, almost in 100% of the cases, they will be considered as refugees and get a refugee status in Sweden. Pretty much, if you have entered the European Union, the Schengen area, via another country, they will be returned to that country instead, and they will have to deal with the asylum process. So, the most common ground for residence permits when it comes to the asylum process is that you are considered to be in need of subsidiary protection. Convention refugees, it's approximately 30%. So the most common ground here is that you are in need of subsidiary protection. Subsidiary, yeah? Yeah, okay, good, just checking. So this is what I was going to say about the asylum process. When it comes to the reception process, the migration board, I forgot to mention earlier, is divided into different divisions. So we have the division of asylum, who is dealing with the asylum process, and then we have the division for reception, who is dealing with all the issues that's related to the reception process. So what the migration board does is that we provide accommodation for asylum seekers, and at the moment I think we have what we have is more or less ordinary housing. We rent apartments in apartment blocks. So at the moment we have like 50,000 spots where people are staying, and we are pretty much left out to what we get. So this means that people are staying in all parts of Sweden, more or less. So we don't have any instrument, more or less, or that's designated to make sure that people are staying in a certain area. We are left out to what we find. And you also have the possibility to stay with relatives or friends. And I think that we have approximately 22,000 people who decides to stay on their own. We are responsible for allowances and grants. During the process, though, if you have shown your proper ID, and if your application is not obvious unfounded, you will have the right to work during the process. So that's an alternative for the people who apply for asylum. The allowance is today, if you're a single man, somewhere, I think it's equivalent to like 35 shekels a day. So it's pocket money, obviously, but the migration board will provide you with housing and so on. We are also responsible for settlement, so we have lots of contacts with the municipalities to make sure that people, when they have been processed at the migration board, and if they have a permission to stay, that they will also find somewhere to live in the municipalities. At the moment, I would say this is one of our really huge challenges. In our system right now, we have 10,000 people who have their application granted, and they are supposed to move out in the municipalities, but there is not enough room, to be frank. So this is right now one of our main challenges, to find housing for those people and to make sure that they will be transferred out in the municipalities. We also operate detention centers, and at the moment we have 230 beds. The detention units in Sweden are quite small. A unit is somewhere between 20 to 35 beds. So it's not as here in Kolot and Sakharonim, which were quite large in comparison. And this means that we have to use those spots in a wise manner. So we are striving after having people spend as short time as possible at the detention center. So right now the average time for staying is 9 to 10 days approximately. And it's also quite costly. If you stay in the open reception facility, the cost will be like 210 shekels per day, but if you are detained, the cost will be 1,900 shekels per day. So it's quite expensive to have people locked up in detention centers. Not to mention the cost from the individual perspective to be deprived of your liberty. And we also assist them with voluntary returns to the country of origin. So this is our task at the Division for Reception, and the rights then for someone who applies for asylum is that the accommodation, as I mentioned, it's free, and you also have the possibility then to stay with relatives or friends. Yeah, I'm a bit ahead of my presentation here, sorry. You have the right to free medical examination, and if you're in emergency, you also have the right to have emergency medical care or also dental care. For adults, when it comes to children, they have the same medical and dental examinations as Swedish children. And if you don't have any means by yourself, you're entitled to apply for a daily allowance. Am I moving too fast? Is this okay? It's okay? Yeah? Good. So I will tell you a little bit about the case management system. Someone who applies for asylum is assigned a reception officer and an asylum officer. So the reception officer is the one who is responsible for questions of an everyday life character. This could be everything from questions regarding the school for kids, or if you're in need of a winter jacket. In Sweden, when I left now, I had snow home. This is not the situation here in Israel, so there are special needs that has to be dealt with in Sweden. So if you don't have the money, we can give you the special allowance for that. And pretty much an important role of the reception officer is also to explain the process, so that the applicant should always be confident in calling or contacting the officer to get to know how things are in the case and so on. They are also responsible for more formal stages of the process. For instance, informing about the migration board decision. So they go through with the decision, and at this point of stage we always have the interpreter, obviously, and just to make sure that the person understands the decision and why the migration board has decided in the way they did. And to do so, we also have kind of a checklist. So when we inform about the decision, we also encourage the person who is subject to the decision to explain in his or her own words how they interpret the decision. And they are also the speaking partner when it comes to the return process. So we have formal meetings in the return process where we go through the process and what we expect from the person who is in that process. And what we are working with here is something that we refer to as motivational interview. So this means that instead of the migration officer telling the person that, look now, you have to go home, this is your only option, we try to make that change come from the person, him or herself, that they realize, okay, my option now is that I need to go home. It's much more easy to work with someone who has decided by themselves that this is the way I want to go. And I mean, I will have to look into myself to, recognize myself in those situations. If I decide something for myself, it's much easier to carry on with it, rather than if someone is telling me to do something. Except for my wife, then that is. Obviously. So, when it comes to the asylum case, it's the asylum officer who is responsible for dealing with that. So, any interview is about 3 to 4 hours, and if the officer thinks that he misses out on something, then the applicant can be called to another interview, which can be 2-3 hours perhaps, something like that. So what takes time now in our process is more or less the waiting time. There's too many people applying for asylum related to how many people that are employed at the migration board. But at the moment I have figures that we are aiming to employ 1,000 persons more. We are 4,200 now. So if you want to become a Swedish citizen and move to Sweden, I think we can arrange jobs for you as well.
As Grant demonstrates, it's quite easy to learn Swedish.
Yeah.
Very easy.
Yeah, Grant is perfect. He's fluent in Swedish.
I'm drunk.
So, some benefits here, and this is from my point of view. I think one of the benefits with having this case management system is that it's rather easy for the applicant to have contact with the migration board. We are in offices all over the country, and they have a special officer who is involved in their case. And this means also that the case officer has a good opportunity to handle the case based on the needs for the applicant. He or she is familiar with the case, and he or she knows what has happened and so on. So I would say that we have a system that pretty much puts the migrant in focus. The needs of the migrant is in focus. And just a quick image when it comes to unaccompanied minors. The influx of unaccompanied minors is not perhaps that high. I think 5,000–6,000 on a yearly basis. So in this process, it's the Swedish Migration Board who is responsible for the migration process. And we are also responsible to point out public counsel that will help the unaccompanied minor with the legal aspects of the case. And also to fill in the application and so on. We also work tightly with the municipality. The municipality is the organ that organizes for the staying or the accommodation for someone who is an unaccompanied minor. And this is something that most often takes place in a group home. It could be a foster home.